Conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so Pesach is, what's Pesach all about? Help me out, guys. What's Pesach all about?
And from what I know about like the whole Christian Bible, it's that when God essentially killed all the firstborn.
Okay, on the night of Pesach, that was the 10th plague. God killed all the firstborn. That was the final straw. And Paro comes and says, about midnight time, get out. Okay? Now, in preparation for that, we had taken what's called the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice, right? And that was the deity that they were worshiping, right? Holy cow, right? They had it then also, they worshiped these animals. Our taking these animals and shechting it as a Korban Pesach was a way that we were casting off all of these aspects of the Egyptian society and Egyptian control and rule over us. So Pesach is the time of our cherus, of our freedom, of our liberation. I always say that that's one of the two lines that's always cut short. Right? Everyone knows, let my people go. Right? But the actual pasuk says, Shalach et ami, send forth my people, v'ya'avduni, so that they will serve me. So the idea of leaving Egypt was to no longer be enslaved to a Paro, a Pharaoh, who was there for his own will, his own power, his own riches, but to be a servant to God who is there, and our service to God is there for our own benefit. Okay? But the idea of Pesach was a liberation from that oppressive slavery into service to Hashem. Right? And that's one of the ideas. You think we go to Mitzrayim, we would celebrate by eating a French croissant or something, a 7-layer cake, right? Instead, what do? We focus on the matzah. What does the matzah represent? Matzah represents both slavery and freedom. In that, it was the bread of affliction, the bread that the slaves would eat, but it also represented our freedom, because as we know, there wasn't enough time for the dough to rise, right? Now, God, who had us there for 210 years, could have added 18 minutes and could have had some nice fresh bread. But the idea was we were not allowed to be eating bread. We had to be eating matzah to have that taste of the slavery and the taste of the freedom that intermingles. Okay? Therefore, Pesach is that night, and in the Haggadah, are you guys familiar with the 4 questions that are asked? The Manishtana. So that's the questions that typically it's the children ask, but everyone needs to ask, the adults also. And the idea is, why is this night different than all the other nights? And the thrust of those questions is, why do we have this disparity? Meaning, in the Jewish calendar, we have Tisha B'Av. That's a night of mourning. And we have also Purim, time of celebration. Yom Kippur, a time of judgment, seriousness. Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur, a day of atonement. Simchat Torah, a day of rejoicing with the Torah. Each day has its clear mode, its clear mood that we're in. And yet Pesach has this mixture of the two. The 4 questions, we eat matzah. Other nights we could eat bread. Now we're only eating matzah. That seems to indicate slavery. All other nights we eat all vegetables. Now we're eating maror, bitterness, the bitter herbs, slavery. Yet on all other nights we sit normally. This night we are reclining in a royal manner. All of the nights we eat normally, now we are dipping our food in a royal manner. So the question of the Manishtana is, why do we have this disparity, or this almost schizophrenic evening where we're doing things that represent slavery and things that represent freedom? And of course, the answer in the Haggadah that we say, the Haggadah is the retelling of the story of Pesach that we say over that night. We have outside of Israel, we have 2 nights, right? The Haggadah is the telling, and the answer is Avadim Hayinu. We were enslaved to power in Mitzrayim. V'yotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham, and God took us out from there. Because this night, and actually is a night of both slavery and freedom. And as we typically do, we don't simply commemorate, but we do our mitzvot, recognizing we are physical beings that are affected by and transformed by the actions that we do. And therefore, we have a very experiential Seder night, right? Both the first and second night, that will be Wednesday night and Thursday night. Once again, those who can join me here, we have a Seder here that Natalie and I run. Love to have you here joining us. But we have the Seder night, and the Seder night involves many things. It involves the 4 cups of wine. That corresponds to the 4 terms of redemption that are mentioned in the Torah in regard to the Exodus from Egypt. And we eat matzah, and we eat maror, and then we eat a matzah and a maror sandwich. We say Hallel at night. Hallel is the praise, the thanksgiving praise song that we say on holidays. Typically, we do it by day. Pesach, we also do it at night as part of the Seder. And I would say the Pesach Seder, so you saw us living in Israel, is something that everyone observes. That all Jews have some sort of a Pesach Seder. It is really, it's interesting. Jews, we connect to one another, even though we each have all these very different countries we came from, and histories of those countries, and histories in those countries, but we all share this common history of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt, and Mount Sinai. And we might have splintered off at later points, but we all have that as our root, as our connection, as that commonality that all Jews share. And that is why we have this kindred spirit amongst all Jews, no matter where we are from, whatever our skin might have, whatever customs we might have, we all share this in a very, very profound manner. Pesach is 2 days of Yom Tov, Wednesday, in this case, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday. Then it goes right into a Shabbos, right? So we have the 3-day Yom Tov. That is the bane of many girls and women. They can't wash their hair for 3 days, whatever. We have a 3-day Yom Tov. Shabbos is the first day of Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed is the intermediary, more mundane days of the holiday. So it's not a Yom Tov. We can drive, we can do all those things, but it still is Pesach in terms of certain differences in our davening, and most importantly, in terms of the not eating chametz and all of those food restrictions, right, is maintained. Then we have the last 2 days of the Yom Tov. This year it'll be Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday. Then we have a whole Friday, and then it's back to Shabbos. Okay? The last 2 days of the Yom Tov are actually a continuation of the Exodus, because the first night is when we left Egypt. So we were physically outside of Egypt, but we were still in a state of tremendous fear of the Egyptians coming after us. In fact, the Egyptians did come after us, and we were pinned there with the Egyptians behind us and the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, in front of us. And most of us had not learned how to swim at that point. So we were pinned over there. And then famously, Nachshon ben Aminadab jumps into the water. It comes ad nafesh up to his soul, up to his nose, and then the water splits. We follow through the water on the dry land, and then the Egyptians follow. We come out, the waters close in on the Egyptians, and that it was the end of the threat of the Egyptians against us, and that was the completion of the physical exodus. Okay? So the first day of Pesach is the actual exodus from Egypt. Paro wanted us to leave at night after midnight when all the firstborn are dying. Go, go, go. Moshe says we're not leaving like thieves in the night. We left the next morning, but that's the first day outside of Israel, the first 2 days of Pesach. That is the first 2 days. Then we have Chol HaMoed, and then we have what's called Shvi'i Shel Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach. Once again, outside of Israel, we have 2 days, 7th and 8th day, but the 7th day of Pesach is when the sea split, and that was completing the deliverance, the exodus from Egypt, because at that point we were no longer in danger from the Egyptians. 49 days after the first day, counting on the next day, we count 49 days. The 50th day is going to be the holiday of Shavuot, and that really is a bookend. Shavuot is when we stood by Mount Sinai and heard God speak. We heard the 10 Commandments. Moshe went up afterwards to receive the tablets, okay, without going through what happens after that. So that was the spiritual exodus from Egypt. So we have the 2 stages of the physical exodus. First day Pesach actually leaving, 7th day of Pesach splitting of the sea. Now that completes the physical leaving of Exodus. And then we have the days until Shavuot. And on Shavuot, that is the spiritual exodus, when we stood by Mount Sinai and heard God speak, and we became this nation of God, this nation of the Torah. A mitzvah that we have going from A to B, from Pesach to Shavuot, is called Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. Now, the Omer is actually a barley flour offering that was brought on the 2nd day of Pesach. So we call it Sfirat HaOmer, we're counting from the Omer, but essentially we are counting 2 Shavuot. We're counting the days until we reach the point of Matan Torah, until we reach the point of the giving of the Torah, the holiday of Shavuot. So that is, in broad outline, right, the idea of the holiday, what it's all about. And this is probably the most central of all of our holidays. This is the start of the Shalosh Regalim, of the 3 pilgrimage holidays: Pesach, Shavuot 7 weeks later, and then Sukkot about 6 months after Pesach. Good. Any questions? Any points anybody wants to join in? Everyone's good? Okay. Pesach is pretty extensive in terms of the preparations that goes into it and the way that it is observed. Judaism is very much, the mitzvot are very much about learning self-control. Right? Famous story that a woman is checking out of the grocery store and her child is having a tantrum. I want. They always put all the candies by the grocery store for the impulse buys and to get the kids. And I want. And the mother whispers something. The kid's having a tantrum. The mother whispers something into the kid's ear, and everything is fine. The kid calms down. No more demands, no more issues. Another patron of the store watches this, has kids of her own, and turns to the mother and says, "Excuse me, can you share with me what were the magic words that you said to your child? I need that. I need to know that information." And the mother explained, "We are Orthodox Jews, and we observe the laws of kashrut. And once I explained to my child that the candy is not kosher, then the child knew that it's off the table. I don't know why my battery goes so quick. Okay, I'm back in a minute to get a plug.
I will pull that.
You'll plug that. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Okay, I think I'm back in business.
Mm.
Okay, I think I'm plugged in. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. So the mother explained we're Orthodox Jews, and therefore the kinnu is off the table. So whereas in general, the whole kashrut really teaches a person or helps guide a person to be in control of oneself, right? But then we have sukkahs, where we could eat whatever we want, kosher of course, but we're limited where we can eat it. And then comes Pesach, where we could eat wherever we want, but we're very limited in terms of what we can eat. So essentially, what is chametz is asur. Chametz is what is prohibited. What is chametz? Leavened grains. So really, the only things that can become chametz are things which have of the 5 grains in them. Okay, and therefore vegetables are not going to be an issue. Fruits are not going to be an issue. Once things are being processed, so then there's the concern what else is being processed in those areas, and that's why it will need to be kosher lePesach products. If you're buying fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, you don't need to worry, but anything at all that is going to be processed will need to be kosher for Pesach. Okay? Um, a big disparity that we have between Ashkenazic and Sephardic customs is that the Sephardim will eat, which is according to the halacha. We have a custom, Ashkenazim have a custom to be stricter, but they will eat, or you eat kitniot on Pesach. You eat rice and beans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Sephardim eat rice, eat beans, because those are not the 5 grains. If they're not the 5 grains, then they can't become chametz. Simple, right? Ashkenazim, for different reasons given, Ashkenazim don't eat kitniot. Kitniot would refer to rice or beans. One reason is that these are often or were often produced in the same areas as grains, and therefore grains would often get mixed up in them, or that with that, you almost can't differentiate between, right? With kitniot, you can make yourself things that looks like regular cake, looks like regular breads, okay? The truth is that with our potato starch and our almond flour and all these things, we're also able to make things that are hard to differentiate between chametz and chametz, right? However, the custom of Bnei Ashkenaz is to not eat kitniot, and therefore we don't eat kitniot. Those of you who are, well, Shelby, so the customs follow that of the husband. Okay, so you are good to go in terms of Ori. Right, I've got some nieces who married Sephardic young men, and they enjoy their kitniot and rice on Pesach. Of course, they no longer enjoy their bagels, cream cheese, and lox, because Sephardim don't have dairy and fish together, right? So everything in life, it's always a balance, always a balance. Yeah. Another difference is, interestingly, and you'll see this amongst many Sephardic homes, or you'll tell me if you guys do this or not. So the Shulchan Aruch says that the matzah that's made, so matzah is made from regular wheat, made from other things also. Wheat, you have oat matzah, you have spelt matzah, but typically it's wheat matzah. So what makes matzah different? It is produced in a manner that we ensure that it does not become chametz, and that from the time that it is mixed with water, it is worked upon, and the whole process is done in less than 18 minutes, and it's never left alone. It's always being pounded and spiked and worked on, and then it goes into the ovens quickly, then it comes out quickly, and therefore it never has the chance to become chametz. Now, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and that's the Mechaber, that's of Yosef Karo, and that's the opinion followed by the Sephardic communities, says that it shouldn't be too thick, and therefore it shouldn't be more than a tefach. It shouldn't be more than 3 inches, we'll say, thick, right? The Ramah says, forget about it. We make ours like these thin crackers, and that's the matzah that we are most familiar with. However, Ori, do you get soft matzah on for Pesach?
No.
Okay, some Sephardim do, others don't, right? But Sephardim can have soft matzah. I spoke to someone here, and he said, I told him he should save some for me for after Pesach. I'm curious to know how it tastes, right? And he said you keep it in the freezer, and then you take it out and you warm it up and you eat it, and soon after that, it becomes virtually inedible. So I don't know if he's just giving me an excuse he didn't want to save any for me, but it seems that that he, that it's also kind of a tough food. Okay? Therefore, all food, all processed food that is eaten on Pesach needs to be kosher lePesach. Okay? It all needs to be kosher lePesach. All of our regular food that we have in our pantries throughout all the year is not acceptable for Pesach. Now, if you happen to have an unopened honey from Costco, so that has an OUP, meaning OU, right? P, right? OUD we know is the OU certification, and D is for dairy. OUP is OU certified for Passover. And in that booklet that I told you guys to hopefully pick up, the OU magazine, Pesach magazine, they have a whole section there of things that have the OU that don't need the OUP. And therefore, even though it doesn't have OUP on it, it is in fact Pesach, kosher for Pesach. In Costco, the kosher cheese that they sell there, not frozen, the regular cheese that they sell there, the mozzarella cheese, all year round, you'll see it's OUP. A lot of the sugar that is sold is right. I think what's the company? See something. There's one of the main companies of sugar. Got what it's called, right? Almost all year round, it has OUP on it. Those things that all year round have OUP on it, that is a bonanza because it's not going to cost any extra than its usual cost. Yes.
So when it comes to I apologize, I think I might have missed this. Does it have to be opened or closed, or can you still use like sugar that was open?
So if you have sugar that was opened, then typically we won't use it because you're not sure what was stuck into there. Once it's opened, we get a little bit neurotic about what might have been gotten mixed up in there. So typically,
buy new things for
yes, from top to bottom. Okay, so anything processed needs to be OUP. The things that are unprocessed, right? Let's say, right? So those things, and I spoke to Idolist last year, right? For example, the Costco almond flour, right? So that is okay. That's OU. That even though it might not be OUP, that is okay for Pesach, right? Let's say the almonds, right? When it's not roasted and it's not salted and not flavored, just raw plain nuts, right? Though peanuts, the custom is Ashkenazim not to eat peanuts, but almonds and cashews, all of that is okay. Okay. The chicken stuff and meat that you buy, it would be OUP, or if you're getting from one of the kosher stores. So at this point already, it's already been they've cleaned their kitchens for Pesach. Everything is OUP. Salmon, let's say the Kirkland salmon, right? So that's on the list of being an OU product that doesn't need an OUP. Eggs and milk, including milk that is the those who are sensitive, I'm missing the word, lactose, including the lactose-free milk. Okay, so those we have the custom that you buy. It doesn't need to be particularly OUP, but it should be bought before Pesach to last you through the entire Pesach. So you buy that beforehand. The reason for that is an interesting reason, and that is that we generally have a concept of beetle, which we'll go into more when we enter into our kashrus series, we'll call it. Bittul is if a little bit fell into a lot, 60-to-1 ratio, it becomes batel. Batel means it becomes nullified. Okay? So a little bit of milk splatters into your chicken soup, as long as you've got 60 times the soup to the drop, you are kosher. You are okay. You could enjoy that soup. Okay? When it comes to Pesach, chametz on Pesach is not batel, even falls into 1 into 1,000. Okay? The general, and that fits into a general rule that we have. A davar sheyesh lo matirin, something that will become permitted, so therefore we're not going to say it becomes nullified. Just wait, and it'll become permitted. Davar, something sheyesh lo matirin, that it has a means of becoming permitted. Chametz will become permitted. So wait a few days. Wait till after Pesach, right? So chametz is something that after Pesach will become permitted. Therefore, okay. There's also chametz Shabbat Pesach. Let's just go with that for now. Okay. Oh wow, thank you, Ezra.
I'm trying.
Okay.
It's not true yet. Not yet.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. So, but before Pesach, before the chametz becomes prohibited, so then it will become batel. So therefore, we will buy the eggs. What's the concern of the eggs? Maybe what the chickens were eating, or not so much. Maybe the stamp on the egg. Who knows? Who knows what that? Right? Whatever it is, right? Right. The shell is semi permeable. Right. If you'll soak an egg in its shell in some blue dyed water, you peel the egg, you'll see that it's blue. Right? Things permeate. So the custom is to buy, okay, we'll come to that in a second, Ryan. Right? The custom is to buy the eggs and to buy the milk beforehand. Now, when we say beforehand, we mean before the time that chametz becomes prohibited. Now, one would think, when does chametz become prohibited? When Pesach begins. And this year it's going to be Wednesday night. Well, that's not true. Because the Torah tells us, min HaTorah, the Torah tells us that once it's the time to slaughter the Pesach sacrifice, you can't do it al chametz. There can't be any chametz around. And the time that the Pesach sacrifice in the time of the temple, the time that was sacrificed, was the afternoon before Pesach. So therefore, min HaTorah, from noontime already, one is not allowed to have any chametz. And therefore, all of these things need to be bought before noontime. And actually, we bring it back a little bit earlier. On the Beth Jacob calendar, you'll see on that Wednesday of Erev Pesach, it'll say the Sof Zman Achilat Chametz, the last time one is allowed to eat any chametz, and then the time that we also need to burn the chametz. We'll come to that soon. Okay, Ryan asked about gebracht. Okay, gebracht is a chumrah, a stringency that some Ashkenazim have taken upon themselves. Gebracht means soaked. And we say, halacha states as follows: once the matzah has been baked, once the wheat has been baked, it can't become chametz. Therefore, I could take matzah and I could soak it in water for 18 minutes, 36 minutes, 36 hours. Doesn't make a difference. It's not going to become chametz. Once it's been baked already, it cannot and it will not become chametz. There are those who have accepted upon themselves the stringency, which I don't, and I would not recommend it to anybody unless a person has a strong family custom for generations that they don't want to break. That I respect, but it's not something that you would want to take upon yourself, right? And that is, any matzah meal cannot become wet. Gebracht, right? So the famous matzah balls, right? If you go now into any of the stores and their Pesach section, you're going to see matzah ball mix, right? And I always think that these non-Jews must think we Jews are so weird. right? All we eat is like this gefilte fish and matzah balls. You go to other sections, there's a lot of things being offered. By us, it's gefilte fish and matzah balls, right? Now, and matzah, right? The reason being, because we can eat almost everything else, right? All the vegetables, all the fruit is not an issue. And even the processed items, not on Pesach, but if you go through any supermarket, you go in the middle aisles, we have the processed food, anything you want, there'll be at least a few that will be offered that are kosher certified. Your pancake mix, your peanut butter, your jellies, any of your cereals, all of those things in the middle parts of the supermarket are kosher. Anyhow, if a person's not eating gebracht, then there's no matzah balls on Pesach, right? That's hard. That's a lot to give up, right? So that gebracht that you brought up, Ryan, so that is a custom that some have, which again, it is an absolute chumrah. I forget which one of the Rabbanim in Europe, when he wanted to impress upon everyone that this is just a chumrah, a stringency, then there's no reason for a person to assume it. He took by his front window and he had this big thing of water and a matzah sitting inside of it, right? Which is the epitome of gebracht, of soaked items, in order to show that it is not usher. So we have the chumrah that all Ashkenazim accept of kitniot, of the grain, of the rice and the bean products. But then you also have on top of that, some have this chumrah of gebracht, which again, let's take that off the table for now.
And the Beit Din won't ask about that.
If the Beit Din, they might ask if you know about gebracht.
Oh, but it's not. Like,
They're not going to expect you to keep gebracht, that's for sure.
So it's just kind of like just a curiosity they might have. It's not one of their test questions.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think the Beit Din is going to go with gebrachts. So, not only does all of our food need to be kosher lePesach, but all of our pots, all of our pans, all of our silverware, right? In other words, so the kosher Jewish home has the dairy sets, has the meat sets, and then for Pesach has the Pesach dairy and the Pesach meat. Okay? Now, in our disposable world, right? So we have all of that, but we use a lot of plastic. Okay? But you can't get by just on plastic because you need to have some metal, right, for your cooking. Right, if you're making some scrambled eggs, right? So the kosher home needs to have some kosher for Pesach pots and pans, meat and dairy. Assuming some families they don't, right? We don't really eat dairy, or we don't cook any dairy, or we don't eat meat. Fair enough. But for those who have meat and dairy, whatever it is, whatever you're eating, we need to have Pesach pots and pans and silverware. We can kosher. There are certain things that we can kosher. If they are metal vessels, they can be koshered. And back in the day, there would be a lot of koshering that people would do in preparation for Pesach, right? Nowadays, we live in a pretty affluent world. And, things like a frying pan, you can't really kosher, especially if it has some Teflon on it, right? So you can't really kosher. So typically you'll have a few things. Now, you can buy the aluminum pans, right? One doesn't need to go overboard, right? One could use a lot of disposable. But if you're making a soup, you need a pot to make the soup, and you're not making your soup in a 9x13 aluminum pan, right? So one needs to be prepared. So in addition to all of the food, one also needs the kalim, the vessels, the utensils, right? It could be that you'll use plastic, but you will need a spatula. You will need a big spoon. You'll need some items, and those are put away year to year for Pesach. Remember, our first Pesach, Natalie and I were in Israel. We moved to Israel after our first year of marriage. So first Pesach, we were by our parents and in-laws. I don't remember. And then the next year, we bought all the stuff for Pesach, and we're putting it away. And Natalie said, we really need to mark so we'll know what's what. And, I always wanted to save some time. No, we'll remember. Famous last words. Next year, we're pulling things out. We have no clue. Was this meat? Was this dairy? Yeah, so take the time and mark it, because it's going to get put away. Right? If you have extra cabinets and you can have, a dairy cabinet and meat cabinet for your Pesach stuff, great. Typically, we don't have that. We just have boxes, and we mark them Pesach. We put all the Pesach stuff in those boxes and put them away. Right? And you take it out. You have no recollection from the year past what was what. So take the time. Don't pull what I tried to pull. And take the time to mark it properly.
Did you figure it out? Were you able to figure it out?
I don't remember. We probably just had to get rid of some stuff. Yeah.
So you can't, it doesn't, there's no time limit with Pesach stuff?
Correct. Okay. Correct. Okay. Now, in addition to the food, and in addition to the kalim, the vessels and everything like that, one also needs to prepare the kitchen for Pesach. Okay? Because if you've got kosher for Pesach food, and you've got kosher for Pesach pots, and you're putting them into your regular chametz, your oven they use all year round, you just blew it, right? Because everything needs to be kosher for Pesach. So you don't need to get a new oven, but you do need to kosher your oven for Pesach, right? Oven, sinks, okay? If you have, so how does one kosher the oven? Again, this is where that OU Pesach magazine comes in handy. You'll have the answers to all of your questions, right? It goes through an oven. If you have a self-cleaning oven, beautiful. You're all set. You set it to self-clean, and that will purge, that will cook it up and burn out anything that might be there. If you don't have a self-cleaning oven, so the general rule when it comes to making things kosher is kibolo kach polto. As it absorbed, that's how it will expel. That's how you would expunge it. So something was used with liquids, hot liquids. So then the way that you would kosher it is by immersing it in boiling hot water. If you have a big pot, right, that can't be, that's too big to put into any other pot. So what we do is we fill it up with water, bring it to a boil, drop in a rock, and the water then cascades out on all sides, and that's how we kosher it. So a sink is a problem, because a sink, you've got hot water in there, and you've got all of your chametz things that have been there all year round. So a sink is a problem on Pesach. So what does one do? So if you have a stainless steel sink, then that is the best situation. That can be koshered. How does one kosher a stainless steel sink? Well, how did it absorb anything that it might have absorbed? Through hot liquid going onto it. So that's how it went in. That's how we get it out. So what do? So we will take a hot water urn, boil it up, and once it reaches a boil, we'll pour it over all surfaces of the sink, the sides, the front, back, side walls, and then the bottom of the sink. And then for good measure, we'll pour some also over the faucet on the top. That's how it went in. That's how it will go out. However, there are some materials that can't be kashered. And porcelain is one of those. And therefore, if you have a porcelain or a tile sink, whatever it might be, so then we've got a problem. That cannot be kashered. So what do? In that case, you need to get some sort of a tub that will fit inside your sink. They sell some tubs that have a little drain on the bottom, and you try to get a tub that the drain basically aligns with the drain of your sink. If not, you raise it up a little bit, and therefore it'll drain through. And that is what one uses in your sink. Okay? So that is how we deal with the sink. Counters. Counters will need to either be covered, or if it's a material which can be kashered, then it could be kashered. If you have granite or any of these stone sorts of counters, those can be kashered. How do you kasher it? Once again, by pouring boiling hot water over the entire surface. That is how we kasher that. If you have, like the kitchen as it was when I first moved into our present house, so for years we had this counter, and it was just a tile counter, so that cannot be kashered. So that needed to be covered. Okay, what one would do is cover it with like thick aluminum foil, and tape it down, and that is what we do with our counters. The oven, I started to say, but I got sidetracked. So the oven, if you have a self-cleaning oven, that's easy. You put it through the self-clean mode. If you don't, kibolo kachpolto. However it went in is how it will go out. How did it absorb anything? I wasn't cooking things against the walls of the oven. It's from the air. When I'm cooking things in there was hot air, then things might have been steaming and might have entered the walls. So it was through heat, but non-direct of an object against it. So what do? I make sure the oven is very clean, and then I turn on the heat. However hot I cook, I've cooked that oven, that's how hot. So we turn it to the highest temperature setting and leave it on for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. And that way, again, kibolo kachpolto. However it might have been absorbed, that's how it will be expunged. The refrigerator. Refrigerator is not such a problem. Why is that? Because it's cold, right? And we know with kashrus, cold doesn't impart from one item to another item. So refrigerator is pretty simple. It needs to be cleaned well. You don't then need to cover shelves, anything like that. It just needs to be cleaned well. Keeping in mind that even a little crumb would be an issue. So what people often do, what Natalie likes to do, is we take out the shelves and we soak it in the bathtub with some water and some bleach. Bleach will render anything inedible. Okay? If it's not ra'ui la'achilat kelev, if it's not something that even a dog would eat, then it's not going to be an issue. So even if it would, right? So we soak it with, right? But it just needs to be cleaned well. Speaking of dogs, so someone mentioned to me today, and it's an important point, we're not allowed to eat any chametz. We're also not allowed to get any benefit. No. I don't think the steaming is good enough, Gabriella. We should pour actually the water that does a more fundamental job on it. Now, pets. So again, we can't eat chametz. We also can't get any benefit from chametz. Now, if I'm feeding my animals, that's going to be a problem. So I need to not be feeding my animals chametz. Now, sometimes that's a problem. Like with fish food, I saw Rabbi Eidelitz has a book. I could take some pictures and post it on our chat. So I don't know. He has since moved from California to New Jersey. So I don't know if there will be the Eidelitz Pesach books this year, which have been a real resource and a real mainstay for years and years. But actually, can I see the magazine for a second? They might mention here pets. I'm not sure what this does. Shira. No, I don't know if they go through. But you'd want to get pet food, fish, hamsters, dogs, cats, whatever it is, that does not have grain, that does not have grains mixed in. Okay? Because again, otherwise we're getting benefit from that. Other things in the kitchen, right? So you've got a mixer. You do not use your regular mixer on Pesach. Toaster, forget about it, right? Microwave, a microwave. We just don't use a microwave on Pesach, right? A microwave. There are okay. There are. Let me see what they say over here in terms of how to kosher it. Microwave. The problem with the microwave is that you have this area by the hinge. If it opens like this, where lots of things end up getting stuck, right? Microwave, I would just say to let it go for Pesach. Let me see what they say. Microwave, 9. Okay. Boiling water for those who kosher plastic. The microwave must be cleaned well, not used for 24 hours. Glass turntable should be removed and replaced with new kosher Pesach surface. A styrofoam cup filled with water should be boiled in the microwave for 10 minutes. The cup should be refilled, moved to another spot, process repeated for 10 more minutes. Cardboard or contact paper should be taped over the glass window pane for the duration of Pesach. That's why I just don't do microwave on Pesach. It's a little bit I don't know. We can't go without the oven or the fridge or the sink. We can go without the microwave. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go run to davening. We'll call it over here, and we will pick up next week. Okay. Good
Thank
thing,
you, Rabbi.
everybody. And thank you, Ava. Ava's the one person that came in person this time. Thank you, Ava.
So for pets, can you hire someone else